taking stock. I've called this one The Music of the Spheres. Now, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a large fortune must be in want of several guitars. You might recognise there the opening paragraph of the first draft of Jane Austen's classic novel Pride and PRS, which somehow later got edited as Pride and Prejudice and substituted wife for the phrase several guitars. Now that's a joke, of course, except in some ways it isn't, and I'll tell you why. I once was invited to an event staged at my guitar shop of choice here in Colchester, where a famous guitar builder was sharing his philosophy and manufacturing criteria and his experimentations. Guitar builders are called, well, I'm not sure whether it's luthiers or luthiers. I don't know which way that word is meant to be pronounced, so perhaps I better stick with guitar builder. Anyway, the luthier in question was, and I hope still is, Paul Reed Smith. Hence the joke at the beginning. His company is called PRS. So for illustrative purposes only, here's a PRS I just happen to have lying around. Using many practical examples with the aid of the guys who'd come to play his guitars for him and with him, because he's a great guitarist himself, Paul spent at least 10 minutes on every aspect of guitar design and construction. He spent 15 minutes talking about the materials he uses to make the nut, which is this strip of material at the top of the fretboard here. He uses bone, so you can't have a vegan guitar apparently. And he uses bone because of how that material might affect the playability of the sound as the string passes through it. That was after he'd waxed lyrical about the varying and unique merits of mahogany sides and back, or Sitka spruce for the top, or ebony and rosewood for the fingerboard, or whatever it happens to be. When it came to wholly electric construction, he talked for ages about the difference between humbucker pickups and the P90s, and how the wire within the pickup being coiled in a particular way affected. Do you know, I can see you drifting off, and I can't even see you. I suppose it is a bit specialist. Now, I love music. As far as I'm concerned, a life without music wouldn't be a life at all. As I write this piece, what do you mean you didn't know there was a script? I'm listening in alternate tracks to the greatest blues rock guitarist in the world, Joe Bonamassa, the greatest musical genius whose life was ever cut short too soon, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and judicious tracks from Scott Joplin and Art Pepper, the jazz alto saxophonist. Actually, thinking about it, apart from Joe Bonamassa, who is in rude good health in Nerdville, USA, they all died young, but left behind a huge legacy. As I was saying, I love music, all kinds of music, guitars most of all, I guess, and all kinds of musicians. As I get older, I become less focused and more disparate in my musical tastes, but I owe music so much. For example, were it not for the annual Gilbert and Sullivan operetta which my school put on at the end of every summer term, I would never have become involved with the stunningly gorgeous girl whom I eventually married. I got dragged into the GNS by a school friend because the chorus of the Mikado was weak in its tenor section. Not that I knew at the time I was a tenor. And eventually ended up with the main comedy part, Coco, the Lord High Executioner, and thereby playing certain scenes with the aforementioned gorgeous girl. Why did my friend drag me in? Well, because I was already involved with him in the folk singing world. And it started from there. So thank you to the young tradition, Steel Eye Span and Gilbert and Sullivan. You shaped the course of the rest of my life. Now, I have to say that although I play the guitar and have sung main roles in various musical productions and been part of choirs and a band, as well as performing solo or with my daughter, who I have to say is a real musician, I still can't read musical notation. Like all musical illiterates, I can see the notes going up and down the stave, but I can't read them. I certainly couldn't look at a page and sing or play what's in the score if I have never heard it before, like a proper musician can. I actually blagged my way through an audition for a posh choir in Plymouth because they rehearsed in a church, didn't know what I did for a living, and handed me a hymn book and asked me to sight read a hymn tune. Thankfully for me, they asked me to sight sing the tune Sagina, which every Methodist would know. Of course, I must have struggled through. In fact, I had to make a couple of deliberate minor errors to make sure they didn't spot that I was singing from memory, not from the page. And can it be? Now, despite never really learning to read music though, it's never stopped me from appreciating the music all around me. And I'm sure that's true for the vast majority of us. Whether or not we can sing or play an instrument, I think most of us can recognise the power of music to move us, to stir our hearts, to comfort and to entertain. You don't need to know the words of Mehen Wlad Van Hadai to be stirred by its singing at a Welsh international rugby match. The same is true of La Marseillaise, though in that case it's probably better that as non-French people we don't know what the words mean. And it isn't the words of Schiller which stir us when we hear the Ode to Joy, it's the music of Beethoven. Although, who fails to be moved at the simple power of words set to music? Who isn't moved by hearing a good singer singing I Don't Know How to Love Him or I Only Want to Say from Jesus Christ Superstar? So I suppose it should be no surprise that during the course of the COVID pandemic, it's been astonishing to see how musicians have used their ingenuity and embraced modern technology in an effort to overcome the sense of isolation, or at least restriction, and have succeeded once more in uniting us in our isolation. Uniting us once again, you might say, by the simple power of music to get right down into the interstices of our lives, where words are themselves enhanced, if not superseded, by the raw emotion which singing or playing or experiencing together, however that is organised, musical collaborations, works to bring us hope and joy and solace to us all. I've been astonished by the reactions of my friends and acquaintances, for example, to my occasional musical offerings on Facebook. All good, I hasten to say. I was dumbstruck myself when my daughter organised her brothers and herself to put together a version of a Beatles song, From Me to You, as a Father's Day card to me. And having not seen them for so long, it moved me to tears to see them on screen singing away. Music is very much God's gift. It has the power to bring us together even though we might be separated. It has the power to bind us in common purpose and express common loyalties and common hopes and fears. And it doesn't require always training. How many of those supporters on the Spy and Cop in Liverpool had any musical training to sing You'll Never Walk Alone from Carousel? And yet, how incredibly did that song so powerfully express the raw emotion post-Hillsborough for so many people on Merseyside and beyond? It's easier to sing the song, it's easier to sing the Lord's song in our own land, that's true. And while those of us who are shielding might feel very much that we've been too isolated for too long and that we should hang our harps upon the willows like the exiled Hebrews, it doesn't take too many notes to be played on the simplest of instruments to convince us otherwise, and remind us that it doesn't take more than a single voice singing to hear the love of God calling us not just to prayer, but to song. So sing. I certainly will. Stay safe, people.